Just about to come to order. Thank you. Clerk, are you ready for us? Great. Good morning and welcome. This is a special meeting of the Inspector General Committee. Today we are meeting as the Inspector General Search Committee once again. Inspector General Steckler has indicated that she will not be, or will likely not be, seeking renewal. I understand there's still a little question mark, but not much. So we will be meeting today to implement a search process for a new Inspector General. The Inspector General's contract runs through end of June. However, thanks. Now that we are seated, I will ask the clerk to call the roll. Thank you.
Patricia Archer.
Here.
David Ehrenberg. Robin Fiore.
Present.
Daniel Gallo. Carrie Howitt. Michael Kreidel.
Here.
Celicia Smith-Gordon.
Here. So we have a quorum, and we will proceed with the Inspector General Search Committee today. If you would all mute your electronic devices, we would appreciate that. I have a number of comment cards. If anyone wishes to address the Inspector General Search Committee, please complete a card. Debbie will accept your card in the front. Before proceeding further, we have minutes from the meeting that was a workshop for how to review the Inspector General. Even though we will not be reviewing this Inspector General, it's wise to approve this document for the future. Have the committee members had a chance to review the minutes, and are there any comments, corrections, questions? I have a question on page 8. My memory fails me, so I need help. The second paragraph from the bottom says that I said I would decide which public officials would be invited. I'm pretty sure I didn't say that because it doesn't sound like me. I would be real hesitant to unilaterally decide such a thing. So does anyone remember what I might have said, and if not, would you accept an amendment of that? I think it should say, if I could be so bold, that I stated that the committee should discuss which public officials would be invited. So if that is an acceptable revision, I would like to ask that that be changed. Any further discussion of the minutes? Your mic is not on.
I'll move approval of the minutes for the workshop from September 23rd. As amended. I'm sorry.
Is there a second? Second. Motion by Committee Member Archer, second by Committee Member Kreidel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have a number of county officials visiting us today to help us with this process. Given my voice, would you all be kind enough to introduce yourselves for the record?
Good morning. I'm Brad Merriman. I'm Assistant County Administrator.
Good morning. I'm Leilani Yan. I'm the Manager of Recruitment and Selection.
Good morning. I'm Wayne Condrey. I'm the Director of Human Resources for Palm Beach County.
Thank you for joining us. We all have been through this together, you three and I, so I think it's good to talk about the inaugural one and what we need to do as a replacement search. how that would be different and what we need to do to move from the materials that we prepared for the inaugural search to ones that would be appropriate for a search for an already existing organization. So thank you very much.
Good morning. I'll go ahead and kick this off. And it seems like only yesterday that we were here with a slightly different group, but when we conducted the inaugural search for our first Inspector General, we were all kind of, blazing some new trails. This morning I'm going to ask Leilani to run through the process that was used, and then we can engage in discussion on any changes or modifications or updates that you would like. Leilani is our manager of recruitment and selection. You all know her very well because she coordinated the process for those of you that are on the Ethics Commission for your new executive director. So with that, Leilani.
Thank you. Good morning again. I'm glad to be here and give you a little bit of history on the selection process that started back in 2010. There was a meeting in December of 2012 that was a mirror image of this.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. It is a 9. Yeah. But in any case, we met and talked about kicking off the process to select the next Inspector General. We were running concurrent processes along with the Executive Director for the Commission on Ethics. So we devised a couple of ads and created them, put them out for review by you, the committee, and we finalized those in January of 2010. We were able to advertise the position. We had about 20 different sources, and we did it at the national level, the state level, and the local level. We also went for a very diverse audience. We used certain types of professional industry associations that might be helpful for narrowing down the pool and finding, the most highly credentialed folks, but as well as the most diverse folks. So we went with the women's group that was for professional CPAs. We went with the Latino Association of Accountants. We went with the National Forum for Black Public Administrators and such. We had about 20 different sources. We advertised from February 1st through the 26th. So it was basically about the entire month of February and netted 98 applicants. Of those, HR did a very basic pre-screening of the applications just to sort them into what appeared to meet our minimum qualifications as well as all others that had appeared in your applicant pool. Something different that we might recommend on this go-around once an advertisement is finalized is that we include what we used in the selection for Mr. Cullen, who's the Executive Director of the COE. For that applicant pool, we had developed a form. It's an additional disclosure of professional conduct. And it was simply a form that asked the applicants to detail any pending charges, prior charges, dispositions of any cases that had been brought against them. And that was turned in along with their application. So I'm suggesting that we may want to add that professional disclosure to this application process as well. We had no problem obtaining those from the applicant pool for the COE director earlier this year, so I don't anticipate there's any problem with that. All of the applications, all of the resumes, anything that we received was screened in real time, and again, I was just looking for meeting minimum qualifications and all others. Those were alphabetized, scanned, and paper packets as well were sent to each of the committee members about 8 days after the close of the application date. So it took us about a week and a half to finalize everything and get the packets out to you. About 3 weeks after you received those packets, you returned to me a list of your top 10 or so applicants based on your review of all of the application materials that were received. Those I compiled into a frequency table, and that was used as just a starting point to begin discussions at the next selection committee meeting to talk about a shortlist. And at that one meeting, applicants were shortlisted. You had 16 people in sort of the initial compilation that appeared on more than one committee member's top 10 list. And from that, you as a committee had picked 12 finalists. Of those 12 finalists, 9 had declined to interview. You interviewed 9 persons over a 2-day period, about a day and a half, May 4th and 5th of 2010. And in between that process of identifying the shortlist and having the interview process, we developed interview questions in HR. We submitted them to you for comment. We solicited from you any questions that you would like to have asked of the candidates. We also drafted an interview procedure, just a way in which to move candidates through the process. And we developed interview questions as well as a written exercise. All of that would, of course, have to be updated. It needs to reflect whatever, the newest, most relevant needs are for the position at this time. And we would work with you to finalize those. The meetings were obviously all held in public meeting format. They were held at that time out at the airport center, which is where HR is located, but we found it worked well having the COE, Executive Director process, right here in the chambers. So, obviously the locations, either of them, is fine for us. We'd be happy to do that. We also, in between the time the shortlist was established and the time you interviewed, did a criminal background check that was run by an outside contractor, Scott Roberts and Associates. And for each of the finalists, they signed a release. We ran those and gave you the results of those, prior to the interview. And we had sent the candidates themselves job description and asked them to have 2 professional references respond directly to HR with their letters of reference by a date certain. That was also prior to interview. So you also had those in hand before the May 4th and 5th dates of the interviews. So you had the backgrounds, you had 2 professional references minimum per candidate, and then you had a total of 9 persons to interview. Over the 2-day period, the interviews were conducted, they were filmed, they were also in the archives, from the website, through Channel 20, et cetera. And at the conclusion of that 2-day period, a selection decision was made. A number 1 choice was selected, as well as a second-ranked person. So if for some reason the number 1 choice was not going to work out with us or did not move forward in the process, you did have a second-ranked choice that you would be willing to move forward with. And we did press releases at the end of the day. So we were also working with Public Affairs Department, to ensure that every step of the process was, done in a public meeting and manner.
So just to clarify, it took 5 months. Could it have been done?
Until interviews, yes.
Could it have been done in less time? I mean, we didn't know what we were doing, and we were running 2 searches at the same time. So given that, in your estimation, are we still working with the same time frame?
I think we could compress time frames, absolutely. I think you could look to be interviewing in end of March, early April. So that's a full month sooner than I would have done it.
So somewhere between 4 and 5 months is an appropriate period of time. Okay, before we take questions from the committee, I would just like to mention that I was scribbling on the vice chair's pad because my voice is poor, asking her to remind me to add to our discussion the interim process, because that's not on our agenda and it is something that we need to discuss before we leave. But I would just like to have that be part of the record. Okay, so committee members. Okay.
What do you mean by interim process? Because as far as I know,
if in fact the
current
Inspector
IT
General does not complete her term, we would need to have a committee meeting to appoint an interim.
An interim. I hate to
Process to be determined, because we haven't done that before yet.
I hate to put her on the spot, but I'm going to do so anyway. Do we have your commitment, at least tentatively, to remain
Well,
until
I'm
the...
here till the end of June unless something happens that is unavoidable. I'm here.
Perfect.
I think what the chair is wanting to do is at least broach what happens if I happen to leave before then, and it's under it's actually in your packet, but basically, in case of a vacancy, the IG committee may appoint a member of the Inspector General's office within 10 days.
Okay.
So that just needs to happen if I happen to go before.
So we
the
would
end of
have to do
January.
that in the sunshine, in a public meeting, so that would be an additional meeting. I regard that as part of the Inspector General Committee, not the Inspector General Search Committee. So I just wanted to mention it, but not, have too much discussion about it unless it comes to unless the committee members would like to vet that process at today's meeting.
No, I think it's perfectly logical to not do that until we find it necessary, if we do find it necessary.
So be it. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay.
Committee members.
All right, we're
Please.
open for questions?
Yes.
All right, a couple of questions. Of course, I'm new to this process. I was not here for the last search of any nature. I see that the questions that were previously posed for the IG are public at this point. I think, and this is a question, quasi-statement, that for the new selection, perhaps they can be refreshed. Perhaps there can be some new questions that are not public so that the interviewees or the applicants may have an idea what we will look for, but not have the exact questions or the written. I think we call it the written test or written sample will modify or change of some sort as well. Could that occur?
Yes, normally with any county department even, we would revise and refresh questions. We would develop new ones, and normally we would just send them to you and get your comments on the quality and the quantity of what you'd like to see.
Okay.
And then we would finalize those prior to the interview process. I would probably say in the sequence of things happening, it would probably occur between the time that you receive those applications and the time that you've set aside for interview day. That's the time frame in which I would send out to you, if you wish, probably more questions than you'll ever need, but ones that, could address the role of the office now.
Yeah, the current role, because there have been some definite changes since
Many.
since our IG assumed the new position. The other question I have, I do think that it's a smart task to add the criminal background check if that was not done previously. What about a civil check of civil lawsuits that have perhaps have occurred or may be pending? That equally may be of interest to our selection of a candidate.
I'm looking right now at the professional conduct questionnaire that we had sent. It was pretty broad. We have things about, to your knowledge, within the last 10 years, have any of your current or former coworkers, subordinates, supervisors, or clients ever filed a formal complaint or accusation of misconduct against you with any regulatory or investigative agency or with your employer? We asked about being the subject of an investigation which could result in civil, administrative, or criminal action.
That's pretty broad, but a civil, that's in the professional context, and I understand that. But to make it clear, there could be a civil suit that has nothing to do with the professional conduct that may be of interest. It could be local, it could be out of state, it could be something to do with property. I don't know, but that might be something you might want to consider adding. Okay?
Thank you.
Here's my question. And I interview and hire a lot of people through the year. What I've found is that when I'm thinking of what I would want to ask a candidate who's replacing a current staff member, some of the best questions I get from that exiting person. So may I assume that that General Steckler will have input anecdotally into these questions, because I think those real-world experiences, good, bad, and indifferent, might help focus some of those questions on what will really happen for a candidate and how that candidate would approach and resolve them.
Yes, we've included Inspector Steckler on all of our communications, thus far, and she's had a chance to look over the materials that we've used in the past and refresh herself on those, and I'm sure that we could make it more applicable to the position as it stands today.
Great.
So if I can just rephrase that, we're affirmatively asking Inspector General Steckler for input.
I'm happy to do so.
Thanks. Is that Mr. Ehrenberg, please.
Thank you. Did I get it right that 9 finalists refused to interview?
No. We had 12 finalists invited and 3 declined to interview, which left us with 9 to interview over the day and a half.
All right. Thank you. And just on that, is there a way to find out before we extend an offer to interview that the person is not interested in interviewing? That's something I was just wondering. It's a shame that you spend the time to whittle it down to the final 12, and of that you have 30% who don't want to interview to begin with. Maybe there's a process of weeding that out before we extend the offer to those 3 people.
We could solicit or even notify applicants that the committee will be shortlisting on, and we can give them a date certain because that would happen in a public meeting. We could just put that notice out and have them respond, if by exception, if they do not wish to be considered further.
Lonnie? I think what we found in this process, I know from my side of the house and hearing why 1 or 2 may have backed out, there is a national search for this position, and you do get national candidates, especially in the Inspector General community. What they do not understand, and maybe what will help, is that Florida has a very active Public Records Act, and everything is done in the sunshine. Applicants don't always know that, and if they have not informed their current employer, that may cause them to suddenly back away when they learn about the open and they read their name in the paper. I think that's what happened here. So maybe just show a little bit more advertisement on the front end that this is all open and transparent will help that, where people won't all of a sudden back out.
If I could also add to that, we did send a letter of notification to every person in the applicant pool once the close date had arrived, February 26th. After that date, the following week, we sent a letter that really advised them of 2 different points. One was what Inspector General had referred to, which is that we do follow the Florida Public Records Law with regard to exemptions as well, because a large portion of this pool also had backgrounds where information had to be redacted before it was made public. But in addition to that, we also advised them that the committee had made a decision in the public forum that they did not wish individually to communicate with applicants who are in this pool. So we advised them of those 2 points the week after the ad closed, so they were very aware of it. But, again, once they're a serious candidate and their name is being brought out, in a public forum, they may also, at that point, rethink whether or not they wish to continue.
So if I understand Mr. Ehrenberg's point, perhaps that should be part of our advertising rather than at a later date. Smith Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, of course, have a keen interest in the diversity. You did mention earlier the manner in which you sought or helped to advertise the position, but I failed to write that information down. Can you review that with me of what you did previously, and what do you plan to do this time in terms of your job search for diversification?
All right. On the prior advertisement for Inspector General, we, of course, had used everything available at the county, which was our pbcgov.jobs career site. We used Channel 20, of course. We did usajobs.gov, which is the official site of the U.S. federal government. the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, which actually netted quite a few applicants for us, the American Institute of CPAs, the Institute of Internal Auditors, the IIA, the Florida Government Finance Officers Association, GovernmentJobs.com, the National Institute of Governmental Purchasing, NIGP, NACO, the National Association of Counties, the Florida Association of Counties, PoliceFBIJobs.com, the American Women's Society of Certified Public Accountants, the Association of Latino Professionals in Finance and Accounting, the National Association of Black Accountants, the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, the National Association of Inspectors General, the Palm Beach Bar Association, the Florida Bar Association, the Palm Beach Post, which also is a hub for Monster.com, so it was on that job board as well, the Sun Sentinel, which is also a hub for Career Builder, which at that time it was actually a hub for Yahoo, and El Latino, which is a local print Hispanic publication.
I'd like for you to consider adding the National Bar Association on your list.
Okay.
Okay.
Although there will be smiles, might I also suggest LinkedIn? Linked.
Oh, sure.
So we don't have to tweet this, but we can do some internet. So back to the folks who declined to be interviewed. There's also, we had this with the Commission on Ethics as well. Some folks use this as a way to improve their current job situation. We just have to accept that that's part of it. So some of the folks are just getting a counteroffer. It would be better if we could not schedule them for an interview, but I think we're sort of stuck with that. All right. At this point, we need to line by line review the credentials that we asked for before. My guess is we will have some amendments to that. So this would be tab, I don't know. Mr. Merriman,
just
please.
add something
Please.
that kind of goes to Mr. Ehrenberg's point. We have a kind of an unusual travel reimbursement policy for applicants. And the policy is, if you're coming in from out of town, usually out of state, we will reimburse your travel expenses under the following circumstances. If you are offered the job and you take it, or if you're not offered the job. If you are offered the job and do not take it, we will not reimburse your travel expenses. And the reason we changed that about 15 years ago is we did some selection processes in January, and a bunch of people came in from New York and Minnesota. We offered the job to like 6 people, and they all turned it down. Got a free trip to South Florida. I said, well, we're not going to do that again. So we changed the plan. So sometimes when people hear that, they decline. Not suggesting that they were trying to get to South Florida in the middle of winter. But you never know.
If I may, the ordinance, which is in the tab under my section, actually is highlighted for you. It's section 2-424, which says the minimum qualifications, selection term of office. That's actually in the ordinance. And it's on your first page under my tab labeled ordinance.
This is 2-424, which is page 4 of the last tab.
Yeah, it's 4B, and then it's the second green paper called ordinance.
So minimum qualifications, selection in term of
Yes.
office.
That's
That
all
paragraph.
spelled out in the ordinance.
Vice Chair Archer, if you wouldn't mind reading that section,
I got it.
because I'm,
Section 2.424.
correct.
Minimum qualifications, selection, and term of office. 1, minimum qualifications. The Inspector General shall be a person who, A, has at least 10 years of experience in any one or a combination of the following fields. 1, as a federal, state, or local law enforcement officer or official. 2, as a federal or state court judge. 3, as a federal, state, local government attorney with expertise in investing investigating fraud, mismanagement, and corruption. 4, as an Inspector General, Certified Public Accountant, or Internal Auditor. 5, as a person with progressive supervisory and managerial experience in an investigative public agency similar to an Inspector General's office. B, has managed and completed complex investigations involving allegations of fraud, theft, deception, and conspiracy. C, has demonstrated the ability to work with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies and the judiciary. D, has a 4-year degree from an accredited institution of higher learning. E, has not been employed by the county, any municipality, or any other governmental entity subject to the authority of the Inspector General Office during the 2-year period immediately prior to selection, unless such employment has been with the Office of Inspector General, Palm Beach County, Florida. F, highly qualified candidates will also have audit-related skills and/or hold one or more of the following professional certifications at the time of selection: Certified Inspector General, Certified Inspector General Investigator, Certified Inspector General Auditor, Certified Public Accountant, Certified Internal Auditor, or Certified Fraud Examiner. 2,
I think we can, let's stop there for a moment. So these are the minimum requirements by the ordinance. These are what are included in the job advertisement. Plus, there could be others, so that's the minimum.
Question.
Please.
Madam Chair. Thank you for highlighting paragraph E. But I've got a question there. Has not been employed by the county. Are we, but and when you read it, you're thinking that it's Palm Beach County until you read the last line, and then it isolates Palm Beach County only. So it says by the county, any municipality, and we're doing a national search.
Subject to the authority.
Okay.
So it's limited to those 41 entities that are under the jurisdiction of the Inspector General.
Okay, so we are only talking about Palm Beach County.
Correct.
Okay. Because that's not,
It
that's
says
not clear.
subject to its authority. Well, we only have authority of those 41 jurisdictions.
Okay. It just was not crystal clear there. All right. So they can be employed in a municipality, Georgia.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So now we're going back to tab.
If I may, what
You
I've
may. Go
gone
ahead.
ahead and done in the same tab is giving, I kind of took the counties, they did a phenomenal job at this process. So what I did is, just to get it started though, is the position description. If you look at the very first section of the IG tab, I tweaked it just slightly that would flow more with the job of what it is today. So whether you want to start off with that one or whether you want to go to the very beginning, just so you know, I did tweak just their position description, not their job ad.
Okay, so
Where are you?
this is the one that says nature of work.
Yes.
This is the first 2 pages of the last tab.
The 4A is the county's original, and 4B, what I've done is I've revised just that nature of work position description. I've provided you the section of the ordinance that applies for what you're all going to be doing, and I will talk later about the Green Book standards. So you actually have now an updated, revised to look at job description.
Okay, in the last tab. So everyone is in the last tab, first 2 pages. This- So before we read that, could I ask the Inspector General, are there any other certifications that have occurred or are available since the ordinance was written that we should be aware of?
The only certification is the office under the investigations is now accredited. So that is the only, if you want to call it a certification, it's an accreditation, but there's no personal certification for any applicant. The CIG, the CIGA, and the CIGI still remain today.
Still remains the same.
May I ask a question? I did read that in your annual report, and it sounds great. Question, though, of the other IG offices, are any others accredited by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, I think there's now 13, possibly 14.
Okay. And so we have to become reaccredited or apply for reaccreditation in 2015.
2004, we'll actually be going through reaccreditation the end of next year. The staff will be going through reaccreditation. Every 3 years, they must go through that tedious process, yes.
Okay.
Just
So-
like a police department.
So it was 2012, I believe, that
We got a credit in 12, but the actual assessment happened in 11.
okay.
They only meet quarterly. So they will actually go in front of the commission February 15, but the actual assessment will happen around November of 14.
Okay, thank you.
So, Ms. Yan, what will help you? You have some committee comments about ways in which we'll refresh questions, add other issues. Does this description now that Inspector General Steckler has revised now become part of how you advertise it? Or is this the county post? How do we regard this piece of paper?
This latest revision would be considered the class specification for the position. So it's something that would be present in our compensation area and records as being the final job description. So any changes that are made here would have to be made, in the system. So our ad
Do you
would then
need
come
us to
from
vote on
this.
it? Do you need us to approve it? Or is this something that HR does without the need for us to?
We're okay with it.
Okay, so we don't need to take an action. That was my question, process-wise.
I have
Ms.
one
Archer.
question, and that is that it had come up when dealing with General Steckler. Sorry about that. My tongue just didn't want to go that way. That we were not definitive when we listed at the time of her hiring what the review criteria would be for a contract renewal. And I think it's important that we include that information in the posting or the ad or job description, at least somewhere, so that we have some knowledge and everyone has knowledge of what our criteria will be.
Can we link to that?
And we already have it on our website, so you can link right to ours.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we want to make the post as concise as possible, but a link to any number of things is always a good idea.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. Questions, comments so far? All right. So I tend to move along. If you want to stop me, please do. I'm not pushing through. The next section of the agenda is public comment. I'm sorry.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
Leilani had mentioned the letter in the criteria that the candidates were not to contact the committee members. Is it the committee's wish to continue with that same process?
I'll explain what happened, and this committee, since it's newly composed, can make a decision. We felt that we did not want to be inundated with personal requests for our support prior to the process being fully public. So the committee at the time said we would like it to be a formal part of our process that we will tell anyone who contacts us to be in contact with the county for specific information, and that we as a group have agreed not to discuss the position so that we would not be accused of being biased or favor or disfavor any particular candidate, so that they all had the same opportunity. Everyone felt that it freed us from, friends, relatives, and coworkers who wanted an inside track. But this committee will have to decide how they want to approach it. Mr. Ehrenberg.
I think it's the right thing to do is to make it public and open, and so we can avoid the private communications between not just the candidates, but anyone they know to reach out to us. I think that would be best for the process if we ban that, just like we did last year.
We encourage everyone to apply who's qualified and have no further discussion is basically where we left it. Mr. Kreidel, do you?
I concur.
So that will be part of our official process.
Thank you.
Just before you move on to public comment, I have also attached for you one more section of the Green Book Standards. This is actually on our website under About OIG, under Standards, but I clipped a couple pieces for you just to at least begin to show you this office is all about standards, and Green Book is extraordinarily important to this office. There are a few elements that I've highlighted. I'm not going to go into a full discussion today. I would like you to read what I've highlighted, and then at a later date, contact me individually so that I can kind of explain to you the importance of the Green Book Standards and how they run, function under our office. That's something because as you will be asking questions of your applicants that understand the Inspector General community will be asking questions of you. So I want to be able to brief you on some very important standards that I think are questions that they may ask you so that you're prepared.
Okay. Guide us to the correct. You said you wanted to read.
Oh, just at your leisure and just contact me.
Okay. This says May 2004. Are these the most up-to-date? Okay, good. Thank you very much. Any further questions, comments, questions before I go to public comments?
I just have one. I'm sorry. On the timing. If it's possible to be in a position to make our decision by April 15th, that would give any individual who might be selected up to a month to give notice, which I think is reasonable. And we would still have someone here prior, hopefully, to Ms. Stickler leaving.
If I may, what our goal will be today is after this meeting, Leilani and Wayne will go back and put a packet together which will include a timeline. And if you want to assign a date to be what is the goal for some sort of final interview process, then we can work backwards from that.
So this committee, as the Inspector General Review Committee, meets in February. That's our standard meeting. We can segment the agenda to also have a short search committee meeting then, if we need to do any work. Or is that too late?
February?
It's the first week, like the second.
Yeah.
By then, we will have the ad run.
Well, we would have to run the ad in January
Yeah.
in order for people to have an ample period
Do you
in
have
which
everything
to
you
apply.
need from us to run an ad now?
Yes, but I'll send you the draft ad before, it gets posted to any of these sources.
We
And
really can't work on it except in public meeting.
No, but we can read what's there.
Yes, so it would be advisory, but you should proceed to post the ad based on the comments. Yes. So my feeling is the process should go forward. We should not hold you up.
Fine.
And we encourage you to make it as condensed a process as possible that is still a robust process,
yes.
so that we're not caught at the end with too little time.
Okay, so I just want to clarify.
Please.
So the ad will be drafted, it will be publicized, and by the February meeting, I'm sorry about that. The ad will be drafted, it will be publicized, so then you will, I guess, email it to us. Of course, we can't discuss it, but when we come to meet in February, then perhaps we will have applicants to discuss.
Well, we won't have applicants to discuss in February, but at least we could work on the questions or anything else that you need us to be involved in.
Well, we could have applicants in February if somebody responds to the ad in
Well, it depends on how long it's going to
No?
be posted, and that may be 30 days.
So if we could do an ad somewhere along the lines of the middle of January to the middle of February, I mean, I think you want to run a full 4-week.
Right, we do.
And then we can compress the process on the backside.
On the backside, right.
Get the applicants reviewed as quickly as we can. You would then review them,
Right.
reconvene, do all the shortlisting, and shoot for the middle
So you
of
could
April.
schedule interviews in the first week of April.
Maybe the middle of April, but in that ballpark. Yeah.
So the deadline for applicants would be then when?
Probably the middle of February. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but, the second, end of the second week of February.
Yeah, my point about the February meeting was just if there is anything that we as a group need to have input about, there is at least that meeting already scheduled that we could tap on to, rather than, but if you need a meeting before that, we'll schedule one.
I don't believe we will.
Okay.
I think it'll work out.
I just wanted to make sure the process was at least
Thank you.
available to you.
I have one other question. If there is a candidate that doesn't seem to meet one of the criteria, and we as a committee deem that individual to be of consequence, can we waive one of the requirements? Or can we not?
The minimum entrance requirements that are contained in the county ordinance cannot be waived.
Right.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
The others can if we deem it effective, but
Just
I'm not
again, the
suggesting we
minimum
will.
entrance requirements that are in the ordinance are,
Right.
they
Right.
cannot be changed.
Okay.
The part that could be discretionary is the part that says highly qualified will also have. So those are the ones that are at our discretion.
Yeah, Leilani's going to present you with a slate of candidates that all meet the minimum entrance requirements.
Indeed. And who passed the criminal
And that are
background check, et
also
cetera, et cetera, et
otherwise
cetera.
qualified by the other things that.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think I'm going to just do this alphabetically. Mr. Baker, would you like to address the committee? Welcome. Bet you thought you wouldn't be doing this again. I share that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is David Baker. I'm a resident of the city of West Palm Beach. I've been involved in the ethics initiative since June of 2007 and have therefore witnessed just about all that's happened since the initiative began, including participating as a spectator, if you can do that, in the selection of the first Inspector General and the first Executive Director of the Commission on Ethics. So I have some perspective on those that I would like to share with you and give you some thoughts. First thing that I will say is that the County Personnel Office did a wonderful job in the process from the beginning. They were diligent. Their advertisements were broadly published and widely, as you could tell from the number, widely responded to, and I hope that you will continue to use them and trust in them because they did a wonderful job. This process that we're going through is very similar to the process that we went through the first time, and I would encourage, particularly with respect to the scope of the search, that it not be reduced beyond what it was the first time. The candidates that ended up being considered by the committee were very varied from very good to excellent, and there were, at least at the end of the day, several candidates who could have been chosen, although I think we all felt that the candidate who was chosen was the best. There were others who would have been would have been okay. It would have, the difficulty of setting up the office, I don't think any of us understood at the time. We understand it now, and we understand what an incredible chore that was. But there are a number of differences this time than last. First of all, almost all of you are different, and all of you except the public defender will be different when the selection is made, since Sheriff Fiore is leaving. So this will be the first experience for all of you. It is a very intense experience, and I want to thank you in advance for the amount of time that you're going to have to dedicate to this process. Those were grueling 2 days of interviews, and I only had to watch. So it was It was remarkable, the effort put in by this committee at the outset, and I thank you in advance for having to go through that again. The difference now, of course, is that the office is set up. It's staffed and running, although it is understaffed for reasons that I'll talk about in a moment. But the major differences, the differences in perception from the outside looking in, are that the office has been mired in litigation. The county, but the office is the focus of it, has been mired in litigation over funding throughout most of the current Inspector General's service. And I think that this group, while you'll certainly be looking for the best candidate when you're interviewing, the candidate's going to have some questions for the committee as well. And I think one of the questions that if I were applying for the Inspector General's position is this office going to be fully funded? There's a commitment in our charter to fund the office at no less than 0.25% of contracts of the overseeing governments. It's never been near that, and I think that that's a question that the proposed Inspector Generals are going to ask, and I think there needs to be an answer for that. One of the things that Commissioner Archer said, and I certainly encourage you all to focus on this, is we didn't know what the evaluation process was going to be. Some of us thought we did, but obviously we didn't, since we're not the Inspector General Committee. I think that needs to be clear going into this process, what that person, how that person can measure for themselves their success in being again renewed as the Inspector General, because I think it's important to have someone who doesn't just want to be here for 4 years. We want to have someone who is expecting to make this an opportunity for them for a number of years. And I think probably the other thing that's different, and it's a real advantage, is that we've had the 4 years, 3.5 years now, to establish the relationship between this committee and the Inspector General. I think the new Inspector General will be looking for how that relationship is going to work. And I don't think it can be simply 2 meetings a year where the Inspector General presents to you their work product and you say hurrah or not so good or whatever. I think that needs to be a continuing relationship where the members of this committee will periodically, individually, you can't do it as a group because it's not a public meeting, but will periodically meet with the Inspector General, give them feedback from how good or bad you think they're doing and what they might do differently, and establish the relationship with them so that when they come, when this event comes up in 4 years from now, it's a little bit more, we have a better framework for it. So I would just encourage you to be prepared, to be thinking about those questions as you come up on the interview of the new Inspector General. I think it's a critical time for the county with the first Inspector General leaving and a new Inspector General coming. It's a critical time for this ethics initiative to establish the framework for the long-term success of that office, that you really are the representatives of the voters when you are sitting in your position as IG committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, and thank you for all your efforts on behalf of the Ethics Initiative. And Ann Cool, if I'm saying your name correctly. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Welcome.
No, that's correct. Thank you.
Would you say your name and address for the
Yes.
clerk?
My name is Ann Cool. The address is 12630 85th Road North, West Palm Beach, Florida. The reason I'm here today is my concerns for the loss of our current Inspector General and the concerns about who we might get as a replacement and what will the pool of candidates be a good pool of candidates. With all the bad press, with all the if you were to go and do a search in the internet, in the Palm Beach Post, to find all the articles that have been written, my concern is that we've had an Inspector General now since 2010, and I'm saying this as a former Palm Beach County employee. I worked for the county for 30 years, and I retired 1 week after 1 week before she was to start working in the county. And my concern is that we haven't reviewed the process, and her exit review. There is no exit review because she's resigning her position. But what I'd like to see is for her to give input on what could be changed and what could be fixed. The big concern I have is the fact that the county attorneys represent her as well as the commissioners, and that to me seems like a conflict of interest. I think she needs to have her own attorney. I think that any person coming in to take this job is going to be concerned about how things are running right now, and I would like to see a sort of an exit review process and have some of the problems corrected before she leaves us. And I think now that she's announced that she's leaving, she'll feel free to say whatever she wants to say, what she feels are the deficits that are causing issues in how she can perform her job. And if this occurs, I believe that we may have a chance at getting a better candidate than if we just say everything's fine, let's just move forward. I think that there needs to be a review process of where we are now. She's been working here for, it's going on 3 years. No one has reviewed the process, and that's my request, that you do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Gert Kuhl? Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My address is 12630 85th Road North. Yes, I am the husband. I think the whole thing with the Commissioners trying to do this task, it's a monumental task. Before you is a giant leviathan, you don't know really which end you should tackle at first. But I think we should look at the issue of what brought this to be in the first place. It was an office that was supposed to be an oversight. Now think about it. If you are going into a company to audit something, just to give you an example, would you ask the management of how to do your job? No. They hired you to do a job. Her job was to be what? A totally independent body to do a job that is a 100% independent audit of what is going on. So, in order for that to happen, you have to be completely what? Separate. I think we need to make sure that all the foundation and framework of the office to all the candidates that apply is very clear. You will be independent. That means infrastructure, no county phone system that can monitor what phone calls you get, no television cameras that monitor who goes to your office, no email system that is county shared where they can monitor what your email is. It needs to be totally independent. Once candidates see that this office is truly independent, stands on its own merit, has its own staff, has its own lawyers, and is funded by the 0.25%, those candidates applying will be more likely to say, yes, I'm going to throw my hat in because I know that I'm not going to be shackled and chained here. I'm going to be able to do what I am able to do, because there are people out there that can do the job and will do the job, but they're not going to apply to something where they're walking in with handcuffs and a muzzle. That's not a good thing to do. We need to ensure, you up there, to make sure that these guidelines are set very clear, that the Inspector General has the ability to do their job, be it male, female. that they can do their job to their fullest extent and have the authority to be independent, and whatever their findings are, stands. Please, see it that this happens. Also, I have a very big concern that the county administrator said there was something against the Inspector General. If the county administrator has something that he said she should be dismissed for, he should bring it out in the open. I think it is the paramount that the public know about it, and if it was a bluff, then he should just rescind it. But it needs to come out in the open. Inspector General is for what? Integrity and openness. And that is what we have all strived for so hard and fought so long for, that we finally get rid of this ugly moniker of Corruption County. It's intrinsic. If there ever has been the cauldron of good old boy networks, we're it. It needs to stop. That's why we fought so long, so hard to get here. And we need to make sure that all candidates that apply know that we mean business and that we want to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhl. Ms. Larson. Thank you.
If anybody's been in this room, I've been to over, 3,000 meetings since October of 2003, and the flaws are still here, committee. Every consent agenda in this county is a nightmare of money blowing out the window. And that's never changed. It's never changed since the minute I walked in here. Because I walked in here in October of 2003, and I knew I was dealing with a bunch of crooks. Amazingly enough, because everybody told me they don't go to jail. Well, that changed because some people were very diligent. I am very diligent. And watching this process, there is no rush. There should be a review of everything that's happened over the last several years, and I mean everything, every investigation. There should be a chronological order of what happened here and what's been missed. I've stood at this podium. I stood at this podium because they were going to destroy 96 boxes of documents. That was when all the county commissioners were getting indicted. We shouldn't have destroyed those documents. This is the kind of stuff I see. Every constituent out here, we're all working on a budget and making lemonade because we're all being handled lemons every day. We can't afford to buy anything because I hear this. I get stopped everywhere I go in this county. It's sick and it's hard and it takes a toll on your heart when I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning and someone's calling me about something that's wrong because they're afraid to come out and talk. I do not think employees should have to, county employees, city employees, any employees, should have to sign a non-disclosed when they leave their job to get their pension. This is what's going on in this county. I'm sorry. I mean, maybe it needs to be brought to the forefront, Contract reviews, things that have been signed off on, tremendous amounts of money, and that's stuff we need to look at. The fact that we have administrators, the reason the Inspector General is here is the conviction of the county commissioners, not the conviction of the employees. That's the facts. This is what we're supposed to be looking at. This is what the voters voted for. They wanted the commissioners to toe the line. Guess what? They don't feel that way. I promise you. I can't repeat what I hear every day. I can't repeat it at this podium. The FCC would tell you to strike it down because people are very vocal and say things in an unusual manner. They don't really edit themselves. I have to edit myself every time I'm up here because if I repeated it, I would be doing a George Carlin skit of the 7 words.
I have to ask you to.
Well, I know, but this is what I want the focus to be, because it is. I think we need a complete review of what the system is. I'm begging you for that, because I'm still here every county commission meeting. If things were going right, I wouldn't have to be here. I wouldn't have to waste my time. So that's, I guess, why I'm here, because, all sign-offs, all investigations, maybe if we go back, I always hear people, we don't want to look back. Well, we have to sometimes to learn what we're going to do right the next time, what we're going to finish. I was an auditor for my company, and so I certainly didn't walk into the store and ask the cashier how to do my job. When I walked into my stores, they called me the Hurricane. And that's how the Inspector General should be in this county. And it is. It is a very unusual situation because you have handcuffs and muzzles not only on the employees, but on everybody. Everybody's not supposed to do or say anything. We're supposed to keep quiet. So hopefully with this review, we should get a summary, at least give us a summary of everything that's happened in the past few years that we think is good, bad, and indifferent. And also, I think one of the things that needs to happen is that we discuss some of the very things that are happening in this building and maybe review those also. Because I don't believe in non-discloses. I don't.
Thank
and
you.
I hope you'll take that
Thank
into
you, Ms. Larson.
consideration. And the citizens need an attorney that sits. We have a county attorneys. We need a citizen attorney that sits separate right in this building. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. For those of you who would like to look back, the Inspector General website has semi-annual reports going back to the very beginning. Thank you. Mr. Santamaria, welcome. I'm doing this alphabetically. Is that? I know Ms. Scheibel is also waiting, but SA comes before SC.
Thank you. I guess you've heard me before. I do have two regrets. Regret number one is that you're going to be leaving as chair.
Thank you very much.
And I am disappointed because I think you've done a very good job as chair.
Thank you.
I congratulate you, and I feel sorry that you'll be leaving us. And my second disappointment, of course, is that Shel Steckler will also be leaving us shortly, because I sincerely feel she did an excellent job under the circumstances. Any deficiencies her office may have had is purely because she was working half-staff. You figure yourself, if you had a job and you only got half the support that you were supposed to have. She was really working with one hand tied behind her back. It's like sending a boxer into the ring and tying one hand. How can you expect that person to do the job that he or she was hired for? So those are the facts. I have been in this county 40 good years. I believe I've been very active in Palm Beach County over those 40 years. I had a successful business. I've been very involved. One of my most important involvements was in the 70s and 80s when I was a co-founder of Citizens for Open Government. So this oversight business, I think I have quite a bit of experience over a 40-year period, and the fact that I was an active member of Citizens for Open Government. I personally, and sometimes with others, sued government 7 times over my first 25 years in the county. And I must say, I won all 7 lawsuits by either court ruling or the defendant backing off on the issue. So I feel if I do go on the attack, I have my ducks in a row and I have proper documentation. So whatever statements I have to make again, because I probably will be repeating myself, you know, the Office of Inspector General has been under siege long before the appointment of Shel Steckler as Inspector General, long before. The attack on the Office of Inspector General began soon after the report, I guess 57-page report of the grand jury. As soon as the grand jury made the report, confirming again that we were in fact corruption county, the attack began. So, I have first-hand knowledge of things that happened right after the report came out, that there were people in government and outside of government, for some reason, one reason or another, did not want the Office of Inspector General to exist at all. So this issue of the current Inspector General is a non-issue. The issue has been and will continue to be the oversight of government. And there are strong forces in government and in business, both. It takes two to tango. Many of the abuses really is a cooperation of both some elected officials, some staff, employees of government, and some members of the business community. I am saying the majority of government and the majority of business is good. So I'm not making any across-the-board statements. I'm saying there are a few in government and a few in business who are strong forces in Palm Beach County who will just do not want to be watched. They don't agree with Time Magazine that said we are corruption county. They do not agree with Forbes magazine that says we are the fourth worst in the United States. They do not agree with the citizens, the 73% of those who voted in the referendum, demanding that we have oversight of all 38 municipalities. They don't agree with this, the 73% of our voters, of the public.
Mr. Santamaria, so can I ask you to wrap up?
I will.
Thank you.
I will wrap up. And they do not.
My apologies.
That's
We're
okay.
trying to keep everyone
That's
on.
Okay. The bottom line is, I think the one word that can sum this all up is probably the one who said it best, I think, is Mr. Cool earlier. And I agree, by the way, I agree with 99% of the previous statements of the speakers. The one word that really is the most important word that you've got to make sure that that is a fact is independence. Independence. Not 99%, not 98%. It has to be 100% independence. The Office of Inspector General must be completely independent. And if there is anyone who wants to assail the Office of Inspector General or the Inspector General, they should say it under oath in a public forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santamaria. Ms. Scheibel.
Good morning. Iris Scheibel, Palm Beach Gardens. First, I'd like to second what David Baker said about the work of Lani and Brad the first time around. They did an outstanding job. It was a very difficult process, and as Dr. Fiore stated, you were doing 2 searches at the same time, which added to it. I am concerned that you're waiting till February. I think that once-a-month meetings will not suffice either, that you ended up towards the hiring last time around to meet every 2 weeks or so. There was a frequent discussion because you're going to have a lot of candidates to look at, and you may want to work on the questions in a more assertive manner than just reviewing them and approving them. So just cautioning you that perhaps you want to allow more time than you've thought about. Also, I strongly agree with the comment about people coming to you and wanting an in on the job, that it's not only important to direct them to HR, but it's important to disclose those contacts. So when you start discussing candidates, and this happened the first time around, where each of the individuals will say, yes, I have been contacted by this person, or yes, I know this person from somewhere. So it's vital that you do that. It's going to be very difficult, given the hurdles that are facing the current IG, to encourage top-notch people to come. And so that's another thing that you have to worry about. Over the last 4 years, when discussing the ethics ordinances in Palm Beach County, many have voiced that perception is reality. So much of the activity in the area of both the ethics and IG ordinances were focused on challenging and changing the perception of Corruption County. I'm glad to see that you're doing a nationwide search, and I strongly encourage you to give bias towards those people who are outside of the county, even outside of the state, when you start considering. The reason I say that is, while I haven't been part of the government nor business community in any official capacity, I've interacted with enough with both to see patterns that are common to most communities, and perhaps worse here. I can't really say. People like to do business with those they know. Rumors or tips come through friends, family members, work associates about various opportunities. Things get done the way they've always been done, and that can be in each municipality having its own culture, or the county. People don't even reflect on whether it's legal or not. It's just, it's always been done that way. Many businesses, small or large, rely on a relationship with the local governments in some capacity to survive. They may be a direct customer and have a contract, or it's a second-order effect, but everybody is interrelated. Public and private partnerships make it difficult to follow the decision-making process or bidding process, and thus create a perception, back to perception, of secrecy, or it's a done deal. Sunshine laws, and I've observed this in various meetings, aren't always adhered to, or they appear to be loosely interpreted. So there may be need to focus on that. And transparency differs greatly from entity to entity within those that are under the undersight of the Inspector General. All of these make for the perception of some level of collusion, real or false, intentional or not. And I think several people have alluded to that. Most people are good, most people don't intend to do anything, but it's perception. And so selecting someone who's anywhere within that framework is going to add to the distrust of a skeptical public. We want 100% independent Inspector General. That was the mantra, as just said, over and over again back in 2009. It's not the Inspector General's job to be friends. While an IG should be polite and civil with those they interact, it's the job of the Inspector General to shine the light on exactly the kinds of relationships or ways of doing business that may in fact inhibit improvement, save money, and allow new or different ways of doing things in a transparent fashion. So once again, take all of that in mind as you're reviewing the candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scheibel. Okay, we've come to the part of the agenda which is committee discussion. I'll start with Mr. Arenberg. Any questions, comments? Mr. Kreidel.
I think that many of the speakers had some excellent points. A standard HR practice is an exit interview, and I think that it's certainly appropriate here, whether we call it an exit review or an exit interview, but I think that there's a lot to be learned from those experiences in the past 3 years. In addition to that, there was an issue about independence that was raised more than once. And I have to concur with the speakers that independence isn't just, what you are, it's what it looks like too. And I think that if systems that are effective, whether they're technology-based systems or paper flow or workflow or structure, I think that to the extent that the Inspector General's office can be made to be firewalled off from other agencies and other influences, I think that it will enhance those people's ability to do the jobs that they're tasked with. And so it starts with the concept of being independent in fact, being independent in appearance, and having an infrastructure that supports the effective execution of both.
Thank you, Mr. Kreidel. Commissioner Smith-Gordon. I thought I would
Thank you.
go to you next.
All right. I didn't want to usurp the...
That's okay. Chair's privilege.
Oh, thank you.
I let the vice chair speak afterwards.
I do have a few points, Madam Chair.
Please.
I'm all for the exit interview. I concur there. I do think that our Inspector General has given us at least some guidelines of her thoughts in writing several times from our October 22nd report that she provided us to the most recent in her annual report that I've taken some time to read. So thank you. She's detailed her concerns, but I'm sure that she has some others that she'd like to voice, and I think it would behoove us to listen to what those are as we look to our search for a new Inspector General. Saying that, though, I do have some comments, though, and of concerns by some of our speakers. I'm not quite sure the appropriate way to do this. This is my first meeting.
Generally, public comments are just that, public comments. We don't respond.
Okay.
But, you know, if there's a particular thing that you wish to take up.
I'll say this in general without specifying people, and I may get the names wrong anyway. But I think that the scope of the search, as we had it before, I think that perhaps was not that it wasn't okay, but I think that we should look and definitely include a segment of the population that we perhaps missed, and that is the African American population, who are jurists and lawyers who may also have a combination of not only the legal background, law enforcement background, and auditing background, combination of both, perhaps all three, which may give us not only diversity, but the criteria of the candidates that we're looking for, and inclusive of those that we may choose to interview. So that's one. The other is I know that there are concerns about what this county has been in the past. I was in this county, but I must say to all those listening that there has been a positive change. And I think the IG and I think the service of the commission, even before I became a commissioner, it has definitely changed. I don't think that we are considered corruption county anymore. Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Archer.
Thank you. I would have to agree with you, Commissioner. I do not believe that we are still considered corruption county. I think we are at a precipice at the moment because we are losing a very effective IG who did an enormous amount of work to set up the entire organization. And I think whoever we choose to follow her is going to be very key on how we are perceived and how we do indeed act as a county in terms of the public's understanding and belief in their government employees and public officials. I think it is of primary importance that we indeed have an exit interview, but have an exit interview as well as at least a partial review, because our IG has spent 4 years here, or will have spent 4 years here. And I think it's an excellent opportunity for an interplay between the IG committee and the IG so that we have a better understanding of how to go forward and what ways to go forward. I, too, feel that it is of primary importance that the IG office be totally independent. That's why I think it's important that we set out the review criteria so that in advance the individual knows by what standards they will be judged, because some are not always written down in the job description. And I think it's important that everyone know that up front. I, too, would have to say that I think Inspector General Steckler has done a marvelous job, and I really do look forward to her input and comments all the way down the line. So thank you. That's it.
So I do have a few comments, despite my voice. By the time the Inspector General Committee meets again in mid-February, I will no longer chair this panel. So it has been an honor to work with Inspector General Steckler. We did pick her as an extraordinary candidate, and we had a very good pool. I would hate to have there be any sense that the committee operated in such a way, the last search, in such a way that diversity was not a primary element. Judge Rogers was chair. We were very interested in diversity, and we were particularly happy to work with HR to ensure that. So let there not be any sense that that wasn't a primary element of any of our searches. As regards the exit interview, I think everyone who has a corporate life knows that exit interviews are voluntary, especially when the exit interview would be a public one. I think Inspector General Steckler plans to have a future career doing something, perhaps even in Florida. And it's somewhat unfair of her to expect her to, in public, somehow call to account all of those who have been obstacles to her achieving all her aims. In fact, she has achieved extraordinary elements of her plan, has put in place an excellent foundation to go forward. We are deeply grateful for the really extraordinary work that you did in setting this up, setting up any new endeavor, especially when you're in hostile territory. Has to be understood as a combat experience, and you served honorably. I wish you great success in whatever you do. I hope you will advise HR privately as to your concerns, or Mr. Baker, who is the head of the Ethics Initiative. I think the idea of firewalls is a great one, but we were lucky to get the independence that we could get, given that someone has to provide the resource base for the Inspector General's office. So the question of independence is an ongoing one, as you know, in Inspector General land throughout. I have a relative who served in a federal Inspector General's office, and he left when Congress buried some of the reports from that office. So you have no idea what an Inspector General's office that's subject to Congress looks like. They don't have any independence at all. Not only are their resources, not theirs to control, but there's actually someone telling them whether they can issue a report or not. Thank God we do not have that situation. The Inspector General has been free to say everything that she wanted to say, perhaps not in the way she'd like to say it, but she has not been stopped. Her reports have been issued. They have not been buried. They have seen the light of day. So for that alone, we must be grateful that we have the process that we have, because it could be incredibly worse. It really could. So thank you for all your work. And I thank everyone who came today and gave us their input. I think the HR folks did an incredible job on the search last time, other than refreshing the questions and perhaps not targeting, it as an inaugural process. I really congratulate you on how thorough and successful it was. You gave us a great pool, and I have such confidence in you that I really have very little to say about the process other than what do you need us for. And I would just also like to remind everyone that everyone on this committee is a volunteer. Some folks happen to have a job in county government, but their service on this committee is voluntary. So while some of you would like us to meet weekly, quarterly, monthly, whatever that, term, I think it's has to be acknowledged that we will do exactly what needs to be done to serve this role, but we cannot expect the volunteers to act as though this were in fact their job. It is a service to the community. So we thank everyone here for their service. Any further comments, questions, thoughts? Inspector General, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you for your kind words, and for all of you all. This is going to be no easy venture, but I do, share the confidence that the HR department did a phenomenal job the first time. They will do that again. And I will reiterate, if you individually want to talk to me about the standards, I think they're important to know before you go forward with your interviews, because you might get asked some tough questions based on some of the comments that you heard today, as a matter of fact. But I was happy to serve. I'm happy that you have an office now that has got a very strong foundation, and you will find a new leader that will continue to make it forward. And you have a great staff. You cannot forget that today you have staff on board, many that know what they're doing and can keep the engine going.
That brings us to a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Seconded. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.